My father abandoned me as trash for 12 years. Then I became a CEO and bought a mansion by the ocean. I was 10 years old when my world collapsed. Childhood should have been filled with laughter, warmth, and bedtime stories. But mine ended on a stormy Thursday afternoon when my father decided I was no longer worthy of being his son. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt coffee. My mother sat at the wooden table, her trembling fingers clutching a cup she hadn't touched in an hour. I stood near the doorway, small, fragile, trying to understand why my father had a suitcase by his side. His tall figure loomed over me, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with something colder than hate, disgust. "Dad, where are you going?" My voice cracked. I hated how weak I sounded. He bent down, but not to hug me, not to comfort me. Instead, he lowered his face so I could see the anger in his eyes. "You're weak," he spat, each word sharp as glass. "You'll never amount to anything. You're nothing but trash." Trash. That word stung like a whip across my face. I looked at my mother for help, but she only sobbed harder, covering her face as if hiding from the truth. "Please," I whispered, "don't leave." He straightened up, grabbed the handle of his suitcase, and without another glance, walked out the door. The sound of it slamming shut echoed in my chest like a gunshot. I stood frozen, staring at the empty doorway. Something inside me broke. In that moment, I wasn't just abandoned. I was erased. The years that followed weren't just hard, they were merciless. Without him, life fell apart faster than I imagined. My mother worked 2 jobs, her hands raw from cleaning houses during the day and serving tables at night. She tried to smile for me, but I saw the pain in her eyes every time she checked the mailbox, knowing another bill had arrived. One winter evening, when I was 11, we sat wrapped in blankets because the heat had been shut off. My mother tried to make it sound like an adventure. "Just think of it as camping inside," she whispered with a forced smile. But I couldn't forget his words. Trash. They haunted me at night, circling my head like vultures. I began to believe him. When I failed a math test, the words screamed in my mind. When kids at school mock my torn shoes, I thought they see it too. I am nothing. By the time I turned 13, I avoided mirrors. I didn't want to see the boy my father despised. Then something happened that changed me forever. One evening, after yet another 12-hour day, my mother collapsed on the couch. She rubbed her temples, exhausted, but forced herself to speak. "You're stronger than he ever was," she said. Her voice was weak, but her eyes held fire. "Don't let his words define you. Promise me that." He stared at her, confused. But what if he was right? She sat up and grabbed my hand. Her grip was firm, almost desperate. "Listen to me. You're not trash. You're my son, and you're going to be more than he ever dreamed of being. One day, he'll regret every word." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time, instead of hearing my father's voice, I heard my mother's. Stronger, louder. "You're not trash." It was the first spark of defiance, a tiny flame inside me that whispered, "I'll prove him wrong." From then on, every insult, every failure, every hardship became fuel. When kids at school laughed at my secondhand clothes, I clenched my fists and told myself, wait. One day, I'll rise above this. When I washed dishes at the diner after school, scraping grease from plates while my classmates went to parties, I whispered silently, "I'll build something better." But at the same time, I carried a darkness. The wound my father left never fully closed. I crave his acknowledgement, his respect, the one thing I thought I'd never get. And so, on that stormy Thursday years ago, when my father called me trash, he unknowingly gave me my greatest motivation. He thought he destroyed me. In truth, he created the fire that would one day burn down everything he stood for. That was the day I swore silently, I will never be weak again. If childhood was cruel, then my teenage years were nothing short of war. By 14, I had already learned more about survival than most adults. Our apartment walls were thin, and in winter, icy drafts snuck through every crack. I woke up shivering, pulling my jacket tighter because the heat had been cut off again. My mother worked herself to the bone, but no matter how many shifts she picked up, the bills always seemed to win. I couldn't stand watching her drown. That's when I got my first job, washing dishes at a greasy diner 3 blocks away. The owner, Mr. Thompson, was a grumpy old man with a permanent scowl. "You better not break a plate, kid," he barked on my first day. "Each one costs more than your weekly pay." I swallowed hard and nodded. My hands were raw from scrubbing, My back ached from standing, but at the end of the night, when he tossed me a crumpled envelope with a few bills inside, I felt a spark of pride. It wasn't much, but it was mine. After school, while my classmates played basketball or video games, I dragged myself to the diner. The smell of burnt oil clung to me, and my clothes were stained with soap and grease. I avoided looking at the other kids because I could see it in their eyes, the unspoken judgment. He's poor. He's nothing. One afternoon, as I walked home, a group of boys from school caught up with me. One of them sneered, pointing at my faded jacket. "Hey, looks like someone raided the garbage again." The others laughed. Their words hit me like knives, but instead of responding, I kept walking. My fists were clenched in my pockets, so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Inside my head, I heard my father's voice again, trash. But then, beneath it, another voice echoed, my mother's, "You're stronger than he ever was." I chose to believe hers. By 16, I was juggling 2 jobs. On weekends, I worked construction, carrying heavy sacks of cement and hauling lumber until my arms trembled. The older men mocked me at first. "Careful, kid, don't snap in half." One laughed as I staggered under the weight of beam. But I didn't quit. I pushed through every aching muscle, every blister, until the mocking turned into nods of respect. One evening, as we packed up, a worker named Carlos clapped me on the shoulder. "You got grit, kid. Most boys your age would have run home crying by now." Those words meant more than he could know. They weren't grand or poetic, but they were the opposite of what my father said. For once, someone saw value in me. Despite the endless grind, there were nights I lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if any of it mattered. Would I ever be more than the boy abandoned at the doorway? Would I ever escape the shadow of that single word, trash? One night, unable to sleep, I whispered into the dark, "I'll show him. I don't know how yet, but I will." School wasn't much kinder. Teachers overlooked me, classmates dismissed me, and I often felt invisible. But invisibility had its advantages. While everyone else wasted time, I focused. I studied late at night, after work, my textbooks propped open under the dim light of a flickering bulb. When exhaustion nearly broke me, I remember my mother's face the night she told me I wasn't worthless. That memory kept me alive. One day, after handing back test results, my math teacher, Mrs. Lawson, paused at my desk. "You've improved," she said with surprise. "You've got potential if you apply yourself." I nodded silently, but inside, a surge of determination burned. It wasn't much, just a test score, but it was proof that effort could carve cracks into the walls surrounding me. By 17, I had saved enough to buy my mother a real winter coat. The look on her face when I handed it to her is something I'll never forget. She ran her fingers over the fabric, tears welling up in her eyes. "Where did you get the money?" she whispered. "I worked for it," I said simply. She pulled me into a hug, her voice shaking. "You're gonna do great things, I know it." I held her tightly, silently making a vow. I won't stop until she lives the life she deserves. But survival had another side. The harder I worked, the more I realized how much I craved not just money, but power. Not power to hurt, but power to protect. To never feel small again. I began reading business books from the library, devouring stories of entrepreneurs who had risen from nothing. Each page lit a fire inside me. If I could do it, why not me? Still, doubt lingered. Sometimes, when the nights grew too quiet, I could almost hear my father's voice, mocking me, daring me to fail. But I had already made my choice. I would not fail, because failure meant he was right, and I refused to give him that satisfaction. At 18, I graduated high school with average grades and calloused hands. Most of my classmates celebrated with parties, but I walked home from my construction shift too exhausted to care. College wasn't an option. I couldn't afford it. My savings barely kept the lights on at home. But inside me burned something more dangerous than poverty: ambition. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life scrubbing dishes or hauling cement. I wanted more. I needed more. It started with a chance encounter. One night at the diner, a man in a suit walked in. He looked out of place among the cracked vinyl booths and sticky floors. I served him coffee, noticing how his watch gleamed under the fluorescent light. "You work hard, kid?" he asked casually, sipping from the chipped mug. "Yes, sir," I replied. He studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Hard work is good, but smart work, that's what changes lives." His words stayed with me long after he left. Smart work. I realized then that if I kept trading hours for dollars, I'd never escape. I needed to build something of my own. That summer, I launched my first small hustle. Using my construction skills, I offered to fix fences, paint houses, and do odd jobs around the neighborhood. I printed flyers on the library computer and taped them to telephone poles. At first, nobody called. Weeks passed, and my confidence wavered. Then one Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. A woman named Mrs. Green needed her porch repaired. I worked 3 days straight, sanding, painting, and hammering until my arms throbbed. When she saw the finished porch, she clapped her hands. "Oh, it looks wonderful. You've got a talent, young man." She paid me $300. It was more than I made in a week at the diner. My hand shook as I counted the bills. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't destined to be nothing. Word spread slowly. A few more neighbors called. Each job taught me something new, not just about carpentry, but about people. I learned how to negotiate, how to listen to what customers wanted, and how to deliver more than they expected. But success was fragile. Some weeks, I had no clients at all. Others, I worked 16 hours a day, falling asleep with splinters in my hands. There were setbacks too. One man refused to pay after I fixed his roof, claiming I had done it wrong. I left that day with empty pockets and crushed pride. When I told my mother, she touched my shoulder gently. "Don't give up," she whispered. "Every stumble is just a step toward something greater." Her words kept me from quitting. Then came the breakthrough. I was hired to paint a garage for a local businessman named Mr. Daniels. He was tall, confident, with the kind of presence that filled a room. As I painted, he stood nearby, asking questions. "Where'd you learn to work like this?" "Mostly by necessity," I admitted. "I needed money, so I figured things out." He raised an eyebrow. "Resourceful. I like that." By the time I finished the job, he offered me more work, painting his office, repairing shelves, even cleaning up his small warehouse. I grabbed every opportunity. One evening, after I finished patching a wall in his office, he leaned back in his chair. "You know, kid, you've got something most people don't drive. Ever thought about business?" I hesitated. "I read about it sometimes." He chuckled. "Reading is a start. But action, that's what makes a businessman. If you're willing, I can teach you a few things." I stared at him, my heart racing. A mentor. A chance. Maybe this was the door I had been waiting for. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to learn." Over the next year, Mr. Daniels taught me lessons I could never find in books. He explained profit margins, negotiation tactics, and the importance of building relationships. "People don't buy products," he said once, tapping his desk. "They buy trust. Remember that." I listened like a sponge, soaking up every word. With his guidance, I expanded my services, hired 2 high school friends part-time, and started bringing in real income. But success came with pressure. Balancing work, my diner shifts, and school became impossible. Exhaustion pushed me to my limits. One night, I collapsed on my bed, whispering, "I can't keep this up." The next morning, I remember my father's voice, mocking me, calling me trash. And suddenly, the exhaustion felt like fuel. Every drop of sweat, every blister was proof I wasn't what he said I was. By 19, I saved enough money to quit the diner for good. When I handed him my apron, Mr. Thompson grunted. "Didn't think you'd last this long, kid. Guess you're tougher than you look." I walked out of that greasy diner with my head high. For the first time in years, I felt free. It wasn't wealth yet. It wasn't glory, but it was a start. A start that would one day lead me to something far greater, a life my father would never believe I was capable of living. By the time I turned 20, my small repair business had grown into something bigger than I ever imagined. What started as patching porches and painting fences had turned into a steady stream of contracts. I wasn't just a boy with a hammer anymore. I was running a company, small but real. Still, growth was brutal. For every step forward, there seemed to be 2 steps back. I hired 3 more workers, which meant more jobs, but also more responsibility. Payroll deadlines kept me awake at night. Some weeks, I barely made enough to pay them. Other weeks, unexpected costs devour my profits. Tools broke, clients delayed payments, and sometimes employees didn't show up at all. One night, sitting at the kitchen table with receipts scattered everywhere, I slammed my fist down in frustration. "I can't do this, Mom. I'm drowning." She placed a steaming cup of tea in front of me and sat down. "You're not drowning. You're learning to swim in deeper water. Big difference." I wanted to argue. but her calm certainty disarmed me. She always believed in me, even when I didn't. The turning point came with a risky decision. A wealthy client offered me a large renovation project, a job worth more than I'd ever handled. It was a chance to prove myself, but it required tools and manpower I didn't yet have. I remember sitting across from Mr. Daniels, my mentor, nervously explaining the situation. If I take it, I'll have to borrow money for equipment. If anything goes wrong, I'll lose everything. He studied me with his sharp eyes. And if you don't take it, then I stay small forever. He leaned back, smiling faintly. Business is a gamble. You'll never grow without risk. The question is, are you ready to bet on yourself? That night, I signed the contract. The weeks that followed were hell. I worked from sunrise to midnight, coordinating workers, managing supplies, and dealing with constant problems. One day, the paint supplier delivered the wrong shade, delaying everything. Another day, 2 of my workers nearly quit after an argument. I was stretched to my breaking point. But every time I thought of giving up, I pictured my father's face the day he called me trash. That image became my fuel. Finally, after months of sweat, the project was complete. When the client walked through the finished building, he nodded approvingly. "You did well, young man. Better than I expected." Those words were worth more than the paycheck. For the first time, I felt I had stepped out of survival and into something greater. But success attracted attention, and not all of it was good. A local contractor, Mr. Reynolds, didn't appreciate a kid stealing clients. He was older, established, and ruthless. One afternoon, he cornered me outside a hardware store. "Listen, boy," he growled, "stay in your lane. You don't belong in this business. Leave the big jobs to real men." I stared at him, my jaw tight. "With all due respect, sir, if clients choose me, maybe it's because I deliver better results." His face darkened. "Careful, you don't know who you're dealing with." I walked away, but inside, fear gnawed at me. He had connections, resources, and power I couldn't match. But I also had something he underestimated: hunger. Months later, Reynolds tried to sabotage me. He spread rumors that my company cut corners and used cheap materials. Clients started calling, hesitant, questioning my reputation. My hard-earned progress began to crumble. I wanted to give up. One night, sitting on the steps outside our apartment, I confessed my doubts to my mother. "He's winning. He's destroying everything I built." She looked at me with steady eyes. "Then build something so strong no lie can break it. Don't fight him with words. Fight him with proof." Those words lit a fire inside me. I doubled down on quality. Every project I took, I went above and beyond. Stronger materials, cleaner finishes, faster deadlines. "Srudi, client noticed." One even said, "I heard rumors, but seeing your work, I know the truth." Reputation, once fragile, became my shield. By 22, my company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. I moved operations into a small office, hired 10 full-time employees, and bought my mother her first car. She cried when I handed her the keys, whispering, "I never thought I'd see this day." But with success came loneliness. While others my age went to college parties, I sat in meetings. While they dated freely, I spent nights buried in contracts. I told myself it didn't matter. Love could wait. Friendship could wait. Everything could wait until I proved myself fully. And in the quiet of the night, when exhaustion blurred my vision, I whispered the same vow I had since childhood. I'll prove him wrong. I'll make him regret the day he threw me away. What I didn't know was that fate was already moving pieces into place. Pieces that would soon bring me face to face with the man I thought I'd never see again. I was 24 when the past came knocking. By then, my business had grown into something real. We weren't just painting fences or patching porches anymore. We were building homes, renovating offices, managing million-dollar contracts. I drove a modest but new car, wore suits tailored to fit, and rented a sleek office overlooking the city skyline. My mother finally lived comfortably, no longer worrying about unpaid bills or empty refrigerators. Life was steady. Life was good, until the day he appeared. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind that reminded me of the day he left. I had just finished a meeting when my secretary buzzed me. "Sir, there's a man here asking to see you. He says it's urgent." "Who is he?" I asked distractedly, shuffling papers. There was a pause. "He says he's your father." The pen slipped from my hand. My chest tightened. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. But when the door opened, there he was, older, grayer, but unmistakably the same man who had walked out on me 14 years ago. "Hello, son," he said, forcing a smile. The word son hit me like a hammer. My stomach churned with anger, confusion, and something I hated to admit, hope. I leaned back in my chair, my voice cold. "What are you doing here?" He stepped forward, dripping rain onto the carpet. His once proud shoulders were slumped. I made mistakes. I shouldn't have left. I want to make things right." I laughed bitterly. Make things right? After 14 years? After calling me trash and walking out without a second thought? His eyes flickered with shame. I was wrong. I was angry, stupid, but I see you now. You've made something of yourself. The room felt suffocating. For years I had dreamed of this moment. Not a reunion, but revenge. And yet, staring at him, all I felt was the boy inside me, still desperate for approval. That evening, I told my mother what happened. She froze, her teacup rattling against the saucer. "He came to you?" "Yes." "Said he wants to make things right." Her jaw tightened. "After what he did, don't let him fool you. He doesn't change. People like him never do." But what if I stopped myself? The words felt wrong even as I thought them. What if he meant it? What if he actually regretted leaving? My mother shook her head. "He saw your success, that's all. If you were still struggling, he wouldn't be here." Her words cut deep because I knew they were true. A week later, he showed up again, this time at my construction site. He stood awkwardly among the workers until I finally approached. "What do you want?" I demanded. He swallowed hard. I need help. I lost my job. The house is gone. I don't have anywhere to stay." There it was, the truth. He hadn't come back for me. He came back for what I had built. Something inside me snapped. "You abandoned us. You left Mom to work herself half to death. You called me trash and walked away without a second glance. And now you show up because you need something?" He flinched at every word but didn't deny it. "I was wrong. I was stupid, but I'm still your father." I stepped closer, my voice shaking with fury. "No, a father protects, supports, loves. You are none of those things. You don't get to use that word." His eyes filled with something I never thought I'd see, fear. For the first time, he was powerless, standing in front of the boy he once crushed. That night, I sat in my office, staring at the city lights. My chest ached with conflict. Part of me wanted to throw him out of my life forever. Another part, small, stubborn, still wanted him to say the words I had waited my whole life to hear. "I'm proud of you." When I finally told my mother, she put her hand on mine. "You don't owe him anything. Remember that." I nodded, but deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. He had reappeared in my life for a reason, and whether I liked it or not, our paths were about to collide again. A few weeks later, I closed on my biggest project yet, a seaside mansion renovation worth millions. As I walked through the grand halls, overlooking the ocean, pride swelled in my chest. This was more than business. It was proof of how far I had come. And yet, I couldn't shake the image of my father's hollow eyes, begging for help. I had built an empire from nothing. But now, the man who once called me trash was at my doorstep, desperate and broken. The question was, would I show him mercy? Or would I finally give him the taste of rejection he had given me all those years ago? The ocean stretched endlessly before me, waves crashing against the cliffs below my new mansion. I had finally done it. The boy once called trash now stood on the balcony of a seaside estate most people only saw in magazines. Yet the victory tasted bitter, because down in the city, my father waited for an answer. He had come to my office again, looking smaller each time I saw him. His clothes hung loose on his frame, his once sharp features worn down by years of bad choices. "I just need a place to stay," he begged. "A chance to get back on my feet." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. The man who had called me worthless now sat trembling, desperate, like a beggar. "Why me?" I asked coldly. "Why not the people you chose over us when you walked away?" His eyes dropped. "They're gone. Everyone's gone. You're all I have left." The silence stretched until he finally looked up, voice breaking. "You're my son." The words that once would have healed me now felt like chains. That night, I told my mother everything. She listened quietly, her face hard. "You're thinking of helping him," she said finally. I didn't answer. "Don't," she warned. "He'll take what he can, and when you're no longer useful, he'll disappear again. You owe him nothing." I rubbed my temples. "But if I turn him away, doesn't that make me just like him? Cold, heartless. Her hand closed over mine. No, it makes you wise. But her words didn't silence the storm inside me. Days turned into weeks. I threw myself into work, signing contracts, walking through luxury estates, making decisions worth millions. Clients shook my hand, praised my vision, treated me with respect. But when I looked in the mirror at night, I still saw the boy from years ago, standing in the doorway, begging his father not to leave. One evening, as I walked through the empty halls of the mansion I had just purchased for myself, I whispered, "Is this enough? Will it ever be enough?" The answer didn't come, only the echo of crashing waves. Then came the breaking point. I was sitting in a boardroom with my executives, discussing a new expansion plan, when my secretary slipped me a note. "He's here again. Refuses to leave." I excused myself and stormed into the lobby. There he was, thinner than before, clutching a worn-out coat. "Please," he said, his voice raw. "I have nowhere else." Anger surged through me. I grabbed his arm and pulled him outside into the rain. "You think you could just walk back into my life after 14 years? After calling me trash? Do you know what those words did to me?" He flinched but didn't let go of my sleeve. "I was wrong. I see it now. You're more than I ever imagined. I'm proud of you." The words I had longed to hear my entire life hung in the air, but instead of healing me, they felt hollow. Too late. Far too late. I stepped back, my chest heaving. "You're proud now? Where was that pride when I worked 3 jobs to keep mom alive? Where was it when I went to bed hungry? When I stood in the cold with holes in my shoes?" Tears streamed down his face. "I can't change the past, but I'm asking for a chance." I closed my eyes. Inside, 2 voices battled. The child who still craved his love and the man who knew better. The choice weighed heavier than any contract I'd ever signed. If I let him in, I risked reopening wounds I had fought so hard to heal. If I turned him away, I would finally take back the power he stole from me. That night, I sat alone in my mansion, staring out at the black ocean. The house was everything I had dreamed of, grand, majestic, untouchable. But it was also empty. Success had filled my pockets, but left a hollow in my chest. I whispered into the darkness, "Do I forgive him? Or do I finally let him drown in the storm he created?" The waves outside roared, as if demanding an answer. And for the first time in years, I realized that the choice wasn't about him. It was about me. Did I want to remain chained to the boy who longed for his father's love? Or was I ready to become the man who needed no one's approval? The answer would define not just my future, but my freedom. The storm raged outside, as if the ocean itself reflected the war within me. I stood at the window of my mansion, lightning flashing across the waves, illuminating the walls I had built, both of stone and of pride. My father's voice echoed in my head, "I'm proud of you." Words I had craved for years, yet now they felt like dust. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through every room of the mansion, touching the polished wood, the marble counters, the glass doors that opened to the endless sea. It was everything I had fought for, but still empty. By dawn, I knew I had to face him one last time. When I entered the hospital room where he now lay, I almost didn't recognize him. His body was frail, his breath shallow. Life had punished him far more brutally than I ever could. His eyes flickered open as I approached. "You came," he whispered, voice weak. I pulled a chair closer, but didn't sit right away. I studied him, the man who had once towered over me like a giant, the man who had spat words that broke me, the man who had vanished and left me to pick up the pieces. And now here he was, reduced to nothing more than fragile bones and fading breath. "I didn't come for you," I said slowly. "I came for me." His brows furrowed in confusion. "For 12 years, I hated you. For 12 years, I carried your words like chains. But I built myself anyway. I became everything you said I couldn't. And now," I paused, exhaling, "I'm free." He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Do you forgive me?" Silence filled the room. I let the question hang, heavy and sharp. Finally, I leaned forward. "No, I don't forgive you. Forgiveness is something you earn, and you never tried to. But I won't let you own me anymore. I release you, not out of love, not out of pity, but because I refuse to let your shadow follow me another day." His eyes glistened. Whether it was regret, sorrow, or just the fading light of life, I couldn't tell. "You're stronger than me," he whispered. This time, I sat down, not as a son longing for a father, but as a man who had survived. Weeks later, He was gone. No grand reconciliation. No dramatiquimbras. Just silence. I stood at the cliffside outside my mansion, watching the waves crash. The ocean stretched endlessly, powerful, relentless, like life itself. For the first time, I felt no weight on my chest. My success wasn't revenge anymore. It wasn't proof. It simply was. I turned back toward the mansion. Inside, my mother waited, her smile warm, her presence steady, the one person who had never abandoned me. As I walked inside, I realized something important. The boy who once begged for his father's approval had finally vanished. All that remained was the man who built his own empire, who had learned that family isn't always blood. It's the people who stay. And with that, I closed the door behind me. The storm had passed. I was free.